In the heart of ancient Egypt, where the sands remember stories that the world has long forgotten, a child ascended the throne of the mightiest civilization on earth. His name was Tutankhamun. He was 9 years old. Born into a lineage of gods and rulers, he became pharaoh before he even understood the weight of his crown. And yet, from the moment he took the throne, his life was no longer his own. Tutankhamun was not born into a peaceful Egypt. His kingdom was in disarray, torn apart by the religious revolution of his father, Pharaoh Akhenaten, a man who defied centuries of worship and tradition. Akhenaten dismantled the old religion, cast down the gods of his ancestors, and elevated a single deity, the Aten, the sun disk, as the supreme being. He abandoned the great temples, relocated the capital to a new city he named Akhetaten, and ruled as both king and prophet. In doing so, he made powerful enemies. When Akhenaten died, his revolution crumbled. The high priests of Amun regained their influence. The temples reopened. The old gods returned. The name Akhenaten became a curse and erasure in stone, and the boy who was born Tutankhamun, living image of the Eight, was hastily renamed Tutankhamun, living image of Amun. His very name was a symbol of political repentance, a public sacrifice to a pantheon his father had dared to reject. But names and titles could not shield the boy from the storm he had inherited. He was placed on the throne not as a sovereign, but as a symbol. And behind him stood two powerful men, I, the calculating vizier with eyes on the crown, and Hormheb, the general who commanded Egypt's armies with iron discipline. These were the true powers of the court. They guided the boy pharaoh, advised him, shaped his reign in their image. To many, he was a puppet. To a few, he was a threat. And to others still, he was a path to power. Tutankhamun reigned in name, but his every decision echoed with the voices of others. His court was filled with hidden agendas. His palace walls echoed with whispers. The restoration of the old gods was celebrated, but beneath the surface old wounds festered. Akhenaten's ghost still haunted the kingdom, and with it came rumors, fears, and enemies unseen. Even as the boy king fulfilled his ceremonial duties, his health raised questions. He was frail. His gait was unsteady. Some whispered of deformities, others of a curse. Few dared speak openly, but all knew the truth. This was a child king who might not grow to become a man. His reign was a fragile illusion held together by ambition and fear. Tutankhamun had become the living image of Amun, but the gods were silent. The throne was his, but the kingdom was not. And as he stepped deeper into his doomed reign, the forces that surrounded him grew more restless. Assassins of ambition, priests with power, generals with visions of empire, each watched the young pharaoh closely, calculating their moment. In the golden silence of his palace, beneath the carved ceilings of the gods, a mystery began to take root. A mystery that would not be unraveled for more than 3,000 years. The mystery of a boy who became a king, the king who died too soon, and the death that has never been explained. Tutankhamun ruled from a throne built by others, seated atop a kingdom still recovering from spiritual upheaval. Though he wore the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, the true power pulsed behind the throne, in the hands of his advisors, his generals, his priests. And yet, history would not forget his name. His reign, brief as it was, became a symbol of restoration. Temples once shuttered by his father were reopened. The names of long-banished gods were once more spoken aloud. Offerings were made. Festivals returned. The capital was quietly moved from Akhetaten back to Thebes, as if his father's heresy had never occurred. Stone by stone, inscription by inscription, Akhenaten's legacy was being erased. And in its place, a new myth was being carefully constructed, one in which Tutankhamun was the chosen of Amun, the restorer of divine order. But beneath this carefully curated image, the boy king was faltering. By his early teens, signs of illness were becoming harder to ignore. His movements were stiff, labored. He required a cane, many canes, in fact, which would later be found buried in his tomb. He was often fatigued, his frame thin and fragile. To those who watched him closely, it was clear the god king was mortal and vulnerable. Some claimed his ailments were divine punishment, retribution from the gods his father had abandoned. Others whispered of a curse passed through royal blood. But the truth was more unsettling still. The royal line had become its own affliction. For generations, Egyptian royalty had married within the family, preserving divine bloodlines but multiplying hidden genetic weaknesses. Tutankhamun himself was born of a brother and sister. His mother, unnamed in the official record, a forgotten queen whose only known title was the Younger Lady. This legacy of inbreeding would not only shape his body, but perhaps determine his fate. As his health declined, so did his independence. His marriage to Ankhesenamun, his half-sister and the daughter of Nefertiti, offered a flicker of hope for a stable dynasty. But their union produced no surviving heirs. The line of Akhenaten, the house of the heretic, was dying. And with it, so too was Tutankhamun. As he grew older, his public appearances became fewer, his time on the battlefield non-existent. While the armies of Egypt marched under the banners of Hormheb, Tutankhamun remained cloistered in the palace, a distant figure shrouded in gold, surrounded by ritual and shadows. He signed decrees, he dedicated temples, but he remained a ghost, more symbol than sovereign. And all the while, the storm around him gathered force. Hormheb grew more ambitious, expanding Egypt's military reach and consolidating control. Once a loyal advisor, began to style himself as heir apparent. The priesthood of Amun, newly restored, reasserted its authority with careful precision. These were not men who served the boy king, they endured him, and perhaps in the silent halls of power they began to consider a future without him. Tutankhamun was not yet 20 years old. His reign was fragile, his body weaker still, and as he approached his final year, one question loomed larger than the rest. Would he die a god, as the legends required? Or would he die a victim, as the silence of history seems to suggest? The final days of Tutankhamun's life remained shrouded in uncertainty. No scrolls recorded his death. No monument proclaimed the passing of a king. There were no grand inscriptions detailing his final battles, no triumphs carved in stone, only silence. And in that silence, suspicion has echoed for centuries. At some point around the age of 19, the boy Pharaoh vanished from the record. No formal announcement was made. No great royal funeral was observed in the temples. His death was sudden, quiet, and deeply troubling. Theories abound. Some suggest he fell from a chariot while hunting, suffering mortal wounds. Others point to signs of illness, including malaria, a clubfoot, and bone disease, afflictions confirmed centuries later through the lens of modern science. CT scans revealed a broken leg, a crushed rib cage, and damage to the skull, injuries that raised more questions than answers. Was it an accident, a tragic fall, or was it something more sinister? Some scholars argue that the injuries occurred after death, during the mummification process, but others remain unconvinced. The damage to the skull, they claim, suggests a blow from behind, deliberate, fatal, and the hurried embalming, his body burned from a chemical reaction within the sealed tomb, suggests panic or haste. And yet perhaps the most damning clue of all lies not in how he died, but in what happened next. Within days of his death, the aged vizier assumed the throne. Not Hormheb, the military strongman, not a new dynasty. The man who had served Akhenaten, the man who had guided the boy king, the man who had everything to gain from Tutankhamun's demise. And then a marriage proposal emerged. A desperate letter from Ankhesenamun, Tutankhamun's widow, to the king of the Hittites, Egypt's enemy. She begged him to send one of his sons to marry her. She wrote that she had no heir and that she would not marry a servant, that she was afraid. But before the Hittite prince could arrive, he was murdered en route, ambushed, silenced. The message was clear: Egypt's throne was not up for negotiation. Shortly after, Ankhesenamun vanishes from the record. Marries her, perhaps against her will, and the boy king is buried in a small, hastily prepared tomb, far beneath his station, far from the valley's grand royal sepulchres. Why was his tomb so small? Why were his treasures crammed into a space that could barely contain them? Why was there no fanfare, no grand procession? Perhaps because those in power wanted him forgotten. Centuries passed. Egypt's sands swallowed the name of Tutankhamun. His successors erased him from history. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and the boy king were stricken from the official record. The past was rewritten. The dynasty of heretics became a phantom, one that time itself seemed determined to bury. And it may have remained so, were it not for a single stroke of luck, thousands of years later. In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter uncovered a sealed doorway beneath the rubble of the Valley of the Kings. Behind it lay a staircase, untouched by looters, undisturbed by centuries. And beyond that, a door still stamped with royal seals. When Carter first glimpsed the treasures within, he famously declared he saw wonderful things. Gold, jewels, a wealth of artifacts untouched by time. But what he had truly uncovered was something far more extraordinary: the tomb of a forgotten pharaoh. A name erased, a king lost to history. And yet his death would once again stir unease. Within months of the tomb's opening, rumors began to spread. Members of Carter's team died under strange circumstances: sudden illness, infections, accidents. Newspapers declared it the curse of the pharaoh. They claimed that those who disturbed the king's rest had unleashed a vengeance from beyond the grave. While science dismissed the idea, the legend persisted. The world was captivated. The name Tutankhamun, once buried in silence, was reborn in fame. He had become, in death, the most famous of all Egyptian kings. But the curse, some argued, was not in the tomb. It was in the life he led, in the power struggles that surrounded him, in the suddenness of his death and the unsettling haste of his burial, in the secrets that his golden mask could never quite hide. Tutankhamun's remains have since been studied with the tools of modern science. CT scans, DNA tests, forensic analysis, each new method offering fragments of the truth. He was sickly. He suffered from malaria. He had a cleft palate, a curved spine, and a clubfoot. His parents were siblings. His death may have been natural or accidental. But still, the questions remain. Why the skull damage? Why the crushed chest? Why the rushed burial? Why did I take the throne? Why did Hormheb, who would later become Pharaoh himself, not act? Was it illness? Was it assassination? Was it political maneuvering masked by divine will? The truth may never be known. The desert guards its secrets jealously. The tomb is silent, and the boy king sleeps beneath a mask of gold, his eyes staring forever into eternity. But one thing is certain. In life, Tutankhamun was a fragile figure, a child caught in the jaws of empire, a puppet in a game played by giants, a soul burdened by a legacy he did not choose. In death, he became immortal. His story, once erased, is now written into the stars. His name, once forbidden, is now eternal, and his mystery, still unsolved, remains one of the most haunting enigmas of the ancient world.